What's up? What's up? What's up? Hello, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this special broadcast. I am not in our usual studio for today. I'm actually heading to Penn Hills for the press conference and protest to get Officer Robert Gowans, removed from Penn Hills Police. If you're unaware, Robert Gowans was the police officer, Wilkinsburg police officer who murdered Romer Talley about a year and a half ago. Wilkinsburg, the government, the mayor, and the police chief were not being forthcoming and supportive of the family. We had to find out 8 months later who the officer was that murdered Romir. And so, it's an ongoing investigation. And rather than, not hiring a person who we know to have murdered a person, Penn Hills decided to quietly hire Robert Gowans, the mayor of Penn Hills, who's also running for Commonwealth judge tomorrow. Actually, knew about it. Not only did she know about Gowans being hired, she gave the okay. She gave the okay. She's not being honest about it, but we have inside information that confirms that Pauline knew that Gowans was, one of the potential hirees, knowing that he killed Ramir, knowing that there's an ongoing investigation, and she decided to hire him anyway. So there's a protest and press conference in Penn Hills happening right now, actually, and I'll be heading that way myself. So thank you all for joining and bearing with me with the different type of technology today. Um, this is the See Us podcast. So today we're actually going to be discussing education. We have a few really dope guests on our docket today. So I'm going to stop rambling and bring up our first guest. Also, shout out to QK Productions. They're usually the ones producing our podcast, and I'm noticing how much work goes into that. So we're gonna bring up Miss Toni Allen. How are you?
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So Miss Toni, where are you from?
I'm originally from Pittsburgh, and I work in Pittsburgh Public Schools. I'm a certified prevention specialist. My specialty is drugs and alcohol. So I deal with all the social issues that will hinder students from learning, drugs and alcohol, bullying, self-esteem, etc. And so prior to working for 20 years for the district, I worked as a service provider, and then I'm also retired military.
Okay.
And I also work with students um, in their summer classes teaching drugs and alcohol as well.
Okay. That's dope. That's dope. What got you into education?
So I just always had a passion of working with children, and drugs and alcohol again is my specialty. My mother was an alcoholic, and as a result of her addiction, our family was always in trauma. So I just felt like, I was called to work with children who were experiencing the same type of um, hardship. And so I just turned that around, and I just started working with children and started dealing with, drugs and alcohol addiction in the family.
Word up. Word up. I always appreciate folks who take their personal stories and challenges and direction in life and turn that into purpose. So that's beautiful. Thank you so much for all that you do. Excited to have this conversation. Definitely excited to have this conversation. I'm going to bring up our next guest, Miss Sierra Street, or should I say Judge Sierra Street. How are you, Sierra? Ooh, these daggone technologies. All right. Sierra, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, I was talking to myself. I was saying that I'm hanging in there. I'm a little frazzled because election day is tomorrow. So, and also relieved at the same time, but happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Most definitely. Most definitely. So thank you for being here. Where are you from?
Well, I live in Philadelphia. I've been in Philadelphia for 26 years, but I'm originally from New York, and I came here to attend law school, and I got married with children, and I came to Philadelphia as a young girl and became the woman I am here. So Philadelphia is home.
Word up, word up. What prompted you to run for Commonwealth judge?
So Commonwealth Court is such an important court. It handles issues like school funding, and that's probably the most important issue that it handles to me. But there's that it handles, including state probation and parole appeals. So I am on the Court of Common Pleas right now, and I've been on the Court of Common Pleas for about 8 years. I sat in the criminal division, and I've had to send people upstate here and there. And whenever I did that, they would always ask me, when will I be paroled? And I couldn't tell them because I have no control over the sentence or the parole once I send them upstate, which is why people beg for county sentences. But some cases require a state incarceration sentence. Well, when that happens, as I said, I would have no control. But what's interesting is that the Commonwealth Court actually handles appeals. So if the parole board rejects your parole application, the Commonwealth Court may end up handling that appeal. And as I'm a judge who was sitting in the criminal division, but before that, I was a public defender. So I also had to, and even as a public defender, I probably never realized that the Commonwealth Court had so much power at the end of the game as far as parole was concerned. So not a lot of people know what the Commonwealth Court does and what's going on. That didn't even exist. And I mean, judges and lawyers don't even know all about the Commonwealth Court. But it handles so many important issues that affect us all. And it's a court that needs to be more balanced. Yes.
I'm sorry. I think we're having some tech issues.
Is it
I
on
had
my?
a couple of folks.
I don't know whose end it's on.
Okay. So there's something going on with the audio. Give us a second. Let me see if I can get our audio together. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you, Mimi. Thank you, Chris, for giving us the heads up that the audio is doing some weird things. So give it a second and try to get us back on track. All right. I'm never doing this again. I hope y'all can see and hear me. I can see and hear myself right now. Sorry for the tech issues. Had to get to a better Wi-Fi place. And also, just heard some very exciting news. Penn Hills apparently fired Robert Gowins. Just got that through as I was trying to get back on here. So that's exciting. More information to come. I'm going to bring our folks right back up. Jesse Era, thank you for your patience. Miss Toni Allen, thank you for your patience. Chef Lux, thank you for your patience. Hey, Judge.
Hi, no problem, no problem. Make sure you drive safely too, Mark. Shannon.
Thank you, thank you. I thought I was being good parked in this parking lot, but I should have known better. I'm in the woods.
Oh, it looks like you're moving, so I thought you were driving, but that's good. I'm glad you're parked.
Yeah.
I was on the road yesterday on a 24-hour road trip, so I know how that is. I've zoomed in from cars and, everything, so I know how that is. But, thank you again for having me. As I was saying, do you want me to continue? Okay, so I was talking about the Commonwealth Court and how important it is and how many different issues that it handles, including school funding, state probation and parole appeals, unemployment compensation, election law. And so when we saw Donald Trump sue everyone last year, everywhere, trying to maintain his presidency, he only won in one court in the entire country, and that was our Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court. And, this court is not balanced. There are 7 Republicans and only 2 Democrats, and that doesn't accurately reflect our state. It shouldn't matter what party you are when you're a judge, but the public wants to see a court that sort of reflects the community that they serve. And we know that we are what they call a swing state, a purple state. So there are a good number of Republicans and a good number of Democrats. But this court doesn't accurately reflect that. There are also no judges of color. No judges of color. And we obviously have people of color in the state of Pennsylvania. And we need a court, that has diversity. And this court lacks diversity right now. There was a judge from Allegheny County originally who now lives in Philadelphia, Judge Doris Smith Ribner, who was the first Black woman elected to that court years ago in 1986 or 7. And she left the court about 10 years ago. And the reason why diversity matters, I'll give you an example, is because when she was on the court, she was instrumental in this landmark decision that restored convicted felons' right to vote back in the year 2000. And so in Pennsylvania, if you have a record or if you're in jail and you are waiting for trial, you can vote. If you're on probation or parole, you can vote. And not everybody knows that. And not every other state provides that privilege to people who have records or that right to people who have records. So, that was a great example of how diversity on that court resulted in a landmark decision that certainly benefited our community, because we know that in the Black community, if people without records couldn't vote, these elections will look totally different, wouldn't they? I mean, I don't know about you, but I can, if I line up 10 of my family members, there's going to be a certain number, of people who might be in that category. If I line up 10 miscellaneous Black people, you're going to find, we know we're overrepresented in the criminal justice system. So to have, not to be able to vote with a record, that would really affect the voting population, and particularly our community. So that's an example of the Commonwealth Court doing a good thing and having diversity on the court when it did previously. And that's what we get. Those are the kind of results we get when we have diversity. And that's why I chose the Commonwealth Court.
Wow, that's amazing. I knew that in Pennsylvania, if you're a convicted felon, that you can still vote. But what I did not know is that it was a Black person that got that passed here. That's amazing.
She worked with Judge Doris Smith Ribner, worked with the reentry community here in Philadelphia, the late Malik Aziz, who's like the godfather of reentry. He was, talking about it and doing it once he left state prison back in the 90s. And she worked with him directly to get that decision in the Commonwealth Court. And I've talked to her about it, and it's known. So, yep. Oh, and I used to do voter registration in the jails before I became a public defender. I used to go into the jails and register people to vote. So a lot of my volunteerism and my work have corresponded with the work of the Commonwealth Court, not by design, but just because I'm interested in issues. And I think these issues are connected to civil rights. When you talk about the right to vote, that's a civil right. When you talk about the right to a proper education, that's a civil right in some regards. So that's why I chose the Commonwealth Court, because of the importance of those issues and how they affect us.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I'm gonna bring up. I see we have Freddie Foo here. Try to get Fred up here. And while I do that, thank you so much for sharing that. It's beautiful to learn such important information, right? Like I knew that we could vote here, and I know that's not a commonly known thing, because that's not true everywhere.
That's right.
But it's nice, to know that it was one of our own who got that passed. Mm-hmm. All right. I'm never doing it this way again, ever in life. All right. Fu, you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing very well. You know me, I don't complain often. How are you?
That's what's up, man. Absolutely. I'm doing good, thank you. So Fu, thank
Good.
you for joining us. I know you were doing your school dad person thing and jumping from
Yeah, I'm out of school right
practice.
now.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Yeah, definitely talking about a dedicated educator. Like, you're definitely one of the people that I think about. So Fu, can you tell us where are you from?
I'm personally from Pittsburgh. I started on the north side. I was raised in the Garfield area through middle school, or excuse me, through high school, in Wilkinsburg through middle school. Now I'm living in Swissvale, so I'm just a Pittsburgh all around native. I went to one public school, was that Wilkinsburg, for 1 year. I'm a Holy Rosary to Wilkinsburg to the neighborhood academy kid. I don't know if that answers where I'm from or my schooling. Does that help?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. All around Pittsburgh guy, although the north side is the best side.
You
But
said it,
yeah.
not me.
Word up. So, Fu, I know that you're in education. You've been in education for a long time. Can you tell us what it is that you do and why?
Yes, ma'am. I work at the neighborhood academy. That's who I graduated from in 2009. I came back in 2018, mid school year. I started as a peer professional, which is just a substitute teacher. And then I kept the position. I also obtained teaching visual arts and vocal arts. So just public speaking to the middle schoolers. I started intertwining cultural acceptance and cultural arts, which is just tying a bow tie, tying a regular tie, basic cultural upbringing things that we don't talk about or think is important to teach, such as like yoga is in my classroom now, and so is hygiene, and we have shower time, a lot of other stuff like that. So I implement the little things into school for my middle schoolers, and then I also train and coach for my high school basketball, track, and weightlifting. So that's my many hats of my school. But public speaking is where I guess reside, as people say now.
Word up, word up. That's what's up. Like, it sounds like you basically teach life skills in school, which is super important.
Yes, ma'am.
Word up. What got you into education? Why did you decide to go back in that space after you graduated?
Honestly, I always wanted to be a math teacher when I was growing up. Like that was always the original goal. And then working in schools, you realize that the teachers aren't really the important people. It's the people that affiliate with the school. You know what I mean? Like the people that you see once or twice. Like the teachers are important, but if I was to be transparent, nobody's really applying to be a teacher these days. Everybody has their own program, work within, etc. And I am, I guess, one of those people. And I realize it, and I'm hands on with the kids, so that's why I wanted to be a part of schooling and tutoring and the youth. They keep you young and on your toes. I think adults act like they know too much. Like the kids, you can actually help. Adults, you can let them fail and not care, which I do. The kids, I kind of care if they fail.
Word up, word up. I appreciate having you on this conversation. You're
Yes,
definitely
ma'am.
someone who's someone that like. There's usually a baby somewhere nearby, like being taught by food, being mentored by food, just hanging out,
Hmm.
being safe with food. So definitely glad that you're able to participate in this conversation, man.
Appreciate it.
All right, so we have one more guest that we're going to bring up here today. Man with the plan, Chef Carlos Thomas. Carlos is running for a school board position, and he's also the founder of Feed the Hood and Confluence Catering. What's going on, Chef Los?
Hey, what's up? How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you so much for participating in this today, and always being very consistent about advocating for not only kids but our community. I always appreciate you, but you're bro.
Absolutely.
So, Los, where are you from?
Um, I kind of share the same sentiments as Fu. I grew up in East Liberty, kind of lived in Homewood for like the past 10, 15 years. So, but I've lived pretty much all over the city of Pittsburgh, and I hate that we have to say where we're from and can't just say I'm from Pittsburgh. So, yeah, I guess I'm from the east side, which is the best side. I don't know about that north side stuff, but yeah, that's where I'm from.
Word up, everything but that last part. I don't know what you was talking about, but it's all good. All right. So, Los, you're from the east side of Pittsburgh, from Pittsburgh. What got you into food? Being a chef and a caterer?
That's a tricky question because I have no clue. Friends tell me that they remember me be saying I was a chef in elementary school. My earliest thought of like food was probably like 10, 11, 12. I used to go to a farm in Indiana, PA with my great uncle, who was a pastor in the city. And then I just watched the Food Network like any other kid, met a black chef, thought like, hey, there's not a lot of black chefs out there. So, let's do this. And kind of landed me in the position I am now.
Word up, word up, word up. Awesome. So I want to get into this conversation. I know it was a little delay with me and my tech issues, which, by the way, the reason why I had tech issues is that I'm not in our usual studio. I was heading to the press conference slash protest to remove Robert Gowins from Penn Hills Police. If you didn't hear me say it the first time, or if you haven't heard it on the news or on Facebook just yet, they fired dude. I haven't had a chance to look up the information, but they released the guy. So like that absolutely comes from community pouring and is showing up and letting folks know we ain't here for it. So if you think your voice don't matter, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. And now the Penn Hills, not only is Penn Hills safer, we're all safer because a murder rate is no longer on the streets. So I definitely want to say that and continue to say that. Make sure you share that information and make sure you continue to believe in your own voice. But what we're here to talk about today is the school to prison pipeline. The school to prison pipeline. I'm going to ask Jesse Era, if you wouldn't mind, can you give us a general overview of what that means? Because you're judging.
And so, to me, the pipeline symbolizes, or it's not, there's really no symbol, it's the actual connection. We know that, so let's just break this down to this. So when you're in school, you know that you start off with equal numbers of young boys and girls. We're talking about in the African American community, in the Black community. And as you keep going up, you notice that the numbers change. And as a woman who's gone to school, any of us know that. So we start off in elementary school, they're equal numbers, and as we go higher, you start seeing the numbers decrease for the males for whatever reason. They're they may end up in schools for difficult children, or alternative schools, right? They may end up there, or they are placed in special ed, or whatever the case may be. But the numbers start to change as they go up. Then you go to middle school, and you start to see people drop out. You start to see, and the boys drop out a little more at a higher rate than the girls. High school, the numbers start to come down, start to change even more. And then when you go to college, you definitely, and if you go beyond college, you definitely see that there were always more Black women than Black men in seeking higher education in positions that where you are able to seek higher education. So we know that there's, we know I've seen that happen. It happened I saw it happen, when I was in school. This is what happened. And now I'm a judge and I'm sitting in criminal court. And, it took one of my white interns one time to ask me, well, what do you think about the fact that all of your defendants are 90+% Black men? And this is something that I know, but I don't think about because I'm used to it. I was a public defender, and all my clients mostly were Black men. And it's just a norm that those are the defendants. So we're overrepresented in courts as far as Black men are concerned, but in schools, as I told you, as you matriculate up through the education system, they're underrepresented, Black men. So there's a correlation right there. You have lower numbers in schools, and I'm talking about from elementary education, you start to see the numbers change. And as you go up, those numbers decrease for Black males. And it's the opposite in the criminal justice system. They are overrepresented. So you get a criminal justice system that is full of Black young men. So, you know, when you're sitting in college or in law school and you're saying, well, where are all the brothers? Or, you know, we have a couple, but where are the rest of them? And then you go to, you know, court and you're saying, oh, look, all the brothers are here. A lot of a lot of black men are here, right here in court. They're in jail. They're, you know, tied up in the system. Then as a criminal court judge, you know, you do when someone's found guilty, you do a pre-sentence investigation, and they do an evaluation, and they talk about the education background, the history of addiction, anything, abuse, whatever. I can definitely tell you that there's always a correlation between a lack of education and the defendants and the type of crime that they come before you with. So even if they have made it through the education system, and I mean just on a basic level as far as a high school grad, they may not be prepared to perform in society or to be productive in society, even if they have graduated. But many haven't graduated, and so all of these dots are connected. You know, they're not in school, they're in the system. Once they're in the system, you see that they have not the education is lacking, that there's a correlation between the lack of schooling and the fact that they cannot, for whatever, you know, I'm sure you guys are going to fill in the blanks as to why they can't matriculate through the system properly like everyone else. Um, and then, but they can, and they do, and they will be represented in the criminal justice system very easily. So, I mean, I'm a mother of a boy who's 21 years old. He's a man now. So I know I have personal experience as a mother and seeing the difference between my daughter, who now is 18 years old and about to graduate, their experiences. And they're different children. But certainly when you have a young black male going through the school system, it's a different experience than it is having a female. And I've seen that as a mother. I saw it as a child, you know, when I grew up and I had a brother and watched my mother, you know, I did pretty well in school, and I saw my mother struggle with my brother, and I struggle with my son, you know, getting him through the education system. And so I'm not sitting here saying I have the answer as to why there's a pipeline. I'm just telling you that I've seen it, I've experienced it, and I know that it's there. Um, you know, as I said, I'm sure some of your other guests may be able to fill in the blanks as to how and why it's there. But I can just tell you, as someone who is involved in the system and then personal experience, you know, someone who's matriculated on several levels of the education system, that I know that there's a discrepancy, a huge discrepancy.
Thank you so much. Um, yeah, so I do want to fill in those blanks. So I'm curious, Chef, what do you think is the cause of this so-called school to prison pipeline? What's contributing?
I definitely think it's the lack of infrastructure in our education system. As Judge Sierra said, we have no problem being represented in certain areas, such as the courtroom and on the criminal side. So we should take a look at what is getting us there. And as she mentioned as well, it's oftentimes the education and the economic background. And from what we know about education, it leads you out of a poverty of a poverty stricken state. And also your environment, like your environment plays a big toll on that too. And I'll say that's one of the two things that we struggle with here in Pittsburgh is a positive learning environment and a positive education system. Thus leading to the reasons why we have a 90% uh, incarceration rate amongst black men. It leads to why 11% of black men are pulled over, uh, three times even the amount of times that white men are pulled over. And then you can take a look at our schools and see the roles that our young black men are playing in our schools. They're mostly athletes. They're not really poised to go into educational backgrounds such as teachers, judges, lawyers, and just about anything else. Like they're kind of criminalized before they even walk into the building, based off of their economic background, their skin color, and even their overall involvement in just the everyday activities of what it takes to be a student.
Can I add something? Because I'm going to have to jump off because I have an in-person event. And I'm sorry to jump in front of you, Miss Toni Allen. But I just wanted to say, to add to what Carlos was saying, here's the other thing about this: the criminalization of what children do. That's a huge factor. And so, as a public defender, I represented juveniles who were charged with crimes in schools, and I remember some of these same things happening, when I was in school, and there were no police there to arrest us. You know what I mean? Nowadays, if something happens, you are charged as a child, and you have to go through the system. So they start the institutionalization of children so much earlier. And I saw that, when I was a public defender representing these kids, and I was saying, this is the same thing that happened. I saw this happen, or this happened to me, or I'm not going to say I did these things, but, I certainly didn't end up in court, and none of us were in court. But today, there's not much you can do, at least in places, urban areas like Philadelphia, and probably a similar situation in Pittsburgh, where kids are not, arrested sometimes, or, definitely entangled in the system as a child. But I have to apologize for, I'm going to have to jump off in a few minutes, just so you know.
And that's exactly what I wanted to say. Students are being arrested at 10 years of age. A 10-year-old is in the 4th or 5th grade. And so our brain is not fully developed until age 25, and there's some research that says even age 30. So how are we arresting a 10-year-old for horse playing in the hallway, running down the hallway, or yelling in school, or pulling a poster off the wall? So they get these disorderly conduct charges, and that's basically anything. And I think we have to stop treating our children like adults. They are not adults, they are children. And we have to stop arresting them at the age of 10. That's ridiculous. And I think this also ties into the for-profit prisons, that we know that people are imprisoned by a third party that is contracted by the government or agency, and then they get per diem based upon the number of prisoners or the number of beds. And so because of that, they have to fill those beds. So who are they going to fill them with when you have people that are dying in prison? You have people that are being paroled. You have people that are finishing their sentence. So who's going to take those places and take those bids? So they're going even younger, to go to a 10-year-old and to arrest a 10-year-old and to charge him with disorderly conduct charges. That starts them in that system, because the next step, they get into the SIS program. So while they're in the SIS program, they miss curfew, or the teacher calls and says they were talking, then that's another check mark against them, and it just takes them up further and further into the system. So one of the things the Pittsburgh Public Schools did was they stopped suspending students in kindergarten to 2nd grade. Carlos, we need to expand that.
Yes.
No elementary school students should be suspended. If they're in a fight, that's why you have student services in your building. We should be doing conflict resolution. We should be teaching them how to handle conflict without being suspended from school.
I think that's, and I think Fu can tap in on this one, is actually taking a look at how charter schools handle suspension. I'm not sure what the neighborhood academy suspension rate is, but I know there's several visits that I've taken up there. It seems like students don't get suspended because they take that extra mile to provide corrective action and not disciplinary action. I think there's a big difference between what corrective action and disciplinary action is. And I think a lot of times we've referred to the latter, which is disciplinary action, which is the court system and the judges and everything that entails, life altering events. But I'm curious to know from Fu, like, what is your experience with, being a charter school, and how do you all deal with corrective action and disciplinary action?
We're college preparatory and we're private school, so we're not under the charter umbrella. The only importance to that, to everyone, if it matters, is we do not get any state nor government funding. So we're not charter, so I just don't want to accidentally let that linger. We are private. But you're right, we don't suspend kids. We haven't suspended a kid in 3 school years. I've been there for 3.5, going on my 4th. And we work on a lot of restorative justice in our school, meaning when someone does something, we make sure they're aware that their crime or their issue or whatever they did is affecting the community, opposed from just them and their situation. So when we make that very clear to the kid or student, whatever you want to categorize, because we use the same tactics for faculty. Whenever faculty's not doing well with a kid, or whenever they're clashing with a kid, or whatever it may be, faculty fall under the same umbrella regarding restorative justice and what they can and can't do, or what's okay and not okay. And after they understand that what happened is affecting the community, then we break down the domino effect on what's affected and how. So that way they can understand who else could be involved and why. And I think showing that why kind of breaks the situation down a lot more, because a lot of times the situation happens, we realize that we're just focused on what we see now, right? It's like in sports, it's that fourth quarter moment. We remember the last shot, but we don't remember how we got down by 20. You know what I mean? So we make sure we break down every aspect of the situation before we target a solution, or this is what you did wrong. Is that does that grant clarity at all for everyone?
It did for me. I'm curious. So I heard who you were talking about, like, expressing to the child, to the student, the impact of their actions on the community. Is there any focus on what might have been, going on in the kid's life that,
Mm-hmm.
caused the behavior?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. And that's why we don't focus on the one incident that the person got in trouble for. We look at the full domino effect, because the person in trouble might not even be the individual that did anything. That's just the person that was sent to the room. And we don't call it like timeout. We don't call it to the office, right? Like there's certain wording that just triggers certain activity within the brain that we just don't use. You got to go to the dean, or you got to go to the principal. Like the wording is just triggering for some people. So there's even the wording that we're getting rid of. Um, and like I said, we got yoga in the school now. So there's kids that they they are mandated yoga opposed from anger management. Like there's just little things that we swapped out, so that way it's not a discipline every time. Like the kid didn't always do something. And sometimes it's not the kids. Sometimes the faculty don't know how to talk to kids. You know what I mean? So it's not always he did it, just go take a walk. Like, nah, we target a lot of people. And they send me in to talk to a lot of adults as well, because a lot of times kids don't feel comfortable expressing to an adult about a certain situation, because there's always that authority thing that we do as adults. And it's always that, who are you talking to? I'm an adult, and I don't really play that, especially with my kids, so they can get their point across. And a lot of schools don't let that happen.
That's super important. That's super important. And I appreciate that y'all, like, rather than criminalizing or penalizing folks for, especially kids, like developing people for just being people and reacting to their circumstances or the environment, or the adults who might not be protecting them and nurturing them the way that they are supposed to be, that y'all are, like looking at, okay, what's the problem here? Like, what's going on? What is the challenge? And including the adults in the space as well. Like, okay, you might be the one causing this, like not the kids. So what's up with you? Like, how are we going to make this better through you, rather than, corrective action for a kid that's, very much like kids are developing, right? Like they're reacting to their environment like the rest of us, but they're also dependent, right? So there's only so much they can do to buffer themselves, that isn't behavioral. So I appreciate that. Los, were you about to say something? I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I was just pointing, like, and I think it's important. The communication tactic is also what's important. And I was a student of Miss Tony's, and I think a part of the reason why, like, we even held the relationship that we've had for this long is because of the communication, of understanding, not only communication, but understanding that, we know where each other comes from, not just based off of me even having to talk about it, but just her being a professional in her career and me being a student. Now it translates to, that has translated over so many times. Now me being an educator, now I use that same mind frame into when I'm talking to my students. Like that communication part is so pivotal. The other thing that, just in my background of quote unquote fighting for custody, and I think we don't look at the whole spectrum when it comes to what it takes to educate children, um, because the whole custody fight in itself is like fighting over property, and that's somewhat how we educate our kids is like, like their property, like we're like their livestock, and we're just shuffling them all into a building, feeding them on a day-to-day basis. I don't know if it's just me growing up on a farm and seeing that actually happen, but when you think about what our education system is and does for our cities across America, it's as much like we're shuffling around livestock, and it's quite discouraging as opposed to actually
Or
creating better humans.
is it safe to say that people are property though, depending on, or that's a different conversation, or both?
I think that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially because it's that when you get into that the whole American system, yeah, that's a different conversation.
Okay.
But
I mean, we can have it at just maybe a different time. Just throwing out there though.
no, I agree with you on some aspects of that. Um, but I think when it comes down to like just the everyday to day basis, like, do we want to be treated as property? I know that the end goal is for us to find, for some of us, is to have some liberation and freedom, especially for Black people. And I think a part of that, of is recognizing that we all of us are somebody's property in some shape or form. We have to break that cycle. And I think education is one of those ways that will break it.
So I wanna language is so important. And when y'all are saying property, like I'm tensing up. Can y'all define what do you mean by property when it comes to people?
Um, I'll, I'll I'll start. I guess we can jump in. When I refer to property, when you look at a lot of the child quote unquote laws that there are, a lot of them are replicated based off of having a dog or a domesticated animal, such as the fact that you have to send your child to a school. That's a state law. Every child under the age of 18 has to be enrolled in an educational institution. That is, you're basically telling me what to do with something that I quote unquote own in the matter of say. Um, Children also have or a lot of the basic human rights. So when we add those two together and you think about all these laws, child labor, and all these referendums about around what children can and cannot do, it really comes down to what you can and cannot do with your property. It's kind of the same rules that you have with your car or your dog or your cat or even where you build your house. Like some of those rules are still integrated into how we deal with our children. That's what I mean by property.
I'm gonna not answer the question, but I'll still answer it because I'd rather have the conversation later. That's why I'd rather not answer it. But in the chat, I did put an article that came out about a year or so ago. And with this article, it talks about how they build the jails and with using um, school testing for fourth graders to identify how many more rooms or pods or whatever term they use in jail to build. So that's how they come up with their, I guess, their numbers based on failure and reading rates. So with that being said, I think they use student testing to create land, if that makes sense. So since they use that same correspondence, I would just say with the social security number, as soon as you get one, to me, I'm just saying to me, as soon as you get a social security number, you kind of become property. Now, what you do with your land, just like you said, as Carlos, is up to you and the owner of that property, right? And the freedom of it. But I think in layman terms, we're property until we're not.
Okay, so I hear y'all. So it sounds like y'all are saying legally the way that our society is structured, that's what makes people property. Like it's defined
Let's
in
go with that. Yes.
the law.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
and I would,
yeah. I'm not saying we're walking slaves. That's not that combo.
yeah, and I would go.
I'm not sure. I can't hear you, Los.
Hey,
There you are.
can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
We're treated as property. Like all of the systems and things that revolve around just us being, in all natural state and ability. We are in this country. and across the world, to be honest, we are treated like property, even down to the social security number, even down to, the idea that even 10 students would read at the same rate as the next 10 students. That's a very slave-like mentality. You work as hard as the next slave. You learn as equally as the next slave, and we know that's not realistic. Especially given you have people when we talk about prison, you got people from all walks of life sitting in prison, from county to the federal level, from low level crime to I'm only here because I'm getting out in 6 months to do 6 months probation because I got money like that. Like that's what we're talking about. That's what I'm talking about in terms of property. Like we don't really get a chance to exercise our full human rights.
Well, we know it's historical. So they had to replace the slaves with the free labor. And so that's why the labor became the prisoners. And so what we really have to do is we have to eliminate these for-profit prisons, because having those for-profit prisons made it into money. You make money by the number of people who are in prison. And so we have to do away with that. And we also have to give judges more of responsibility in sentencing, that mandated sentencing, that you do something, okay, 25 years is the minimum you can get. Why? They have to be able to use some common sense, and they have to be able to give people another chance, because folks mess up. People make mistakes. We all make mistakes. None of us is perfect. None of us go through this life without doing things that we are possibly ashamed of. So, but people deserve to have a second chance, and they deserve to have a third chance until it's at a point where they don't deserve any more chances, depending upon what they do. But we should be more gracious to people, because we know, as Fu was saying, that things are set up for certain populations to fail, and it's from the very beginning. And so it's our responsibility to make sure that we break those generational curses, that we stand in the gap and we say, okay, I'm going to do all that I can do to prevent this from happening again, or prevent this from happening to another student. There is no reason why a 10-year-old should be have charges filed against them. None whatsoever. What can a 10-year-old do? Come on. If they get into a fight, kids get into fights. So should they have assault charges filed against them because they were in a fight? It's ridiculous. So we have to eliminate the for-profit prisons. We have to increase the age back to 18, maybe, of charges being brought against children. We have to stop treating our children like they're adults, because they're not adults. They're not miniature adults. They are children that do not have enough knowledge, children whose minds aren't completely developed yet. So we have to stop treating them as they are adults, because they're not adults.
And just to speak to that, and I think at the point where we are now, as you were saying, I was like, well, what if we charge the parents? And I think just understanding the point where we are now and where we have come from is that we can't even charge the parents, because they're suffering from the same lack of education and principles that we've been suffering since the Emancipation Proclamation. We have to start changing. There is no, we have to start changing generations, not just changing the children. I think it's time to take a different approach at what education looks like, not just for children, but for all Americans.
Charging parents don't work.
Yeah,
that's what the truancy is all about,
and just
charging parents.
The parents can't control their own situations, so putting them under fire just puts the child under fire, which just throws the whole family dynamic off, which throws the community off, which throws the city off, which throws the state. And it's just a domino effect of how I think a lot of these issues, we really need to start taking a deep dive and looking at every possible solution, not every possible, how can we pass this off to another system that is also failing. I think we were talking about in the earlier conversation, we're talking about Westinghouse students coming, or Wilkinsburg students coming to Westinghouse. And it's like taking one failing school district and moving and implementing into another school district. You're exacerbating the problems at this point for not only the students that you're responsible for, but the students that you now you're increasing your problem. So with that being said, we got to stop passing the buck. Like passing the buck to another system, to another that's just as broken as this one, instead of actually trying to fix the one that we're in. Which is also the response. I bring back the responsibility of educators. I think that instead of educating the educators that, yeah, you can call the police, yeah, you can call school security. You need to, as an educator, as the dominant person in your classroom, how are your conflict resolution skills? You know, can you teach those conflict resolution skills? Because that's what really a lot of this comes down to, is that conflict resolution. How are we resolving the conflict that we're faced with? Our educators are becoming frustrated. They're picking up the phones. They're calling the police. The students are frustrated because they're dealing with the conflict of whatever they left their house with that morning. The administration's is frustrated dealing with the conflict, the leverage between teachers and the board. So there's conflict all over the place. How are we resolving the conflict that we've had for it's been too long.
I want to, because I think like all of this. Okay, so Losi had said earlier, like we need infrastructure, and I feel where that comes from, but I also feel like it's not infrastructure that we have the infrastructure, or the infrastructure exists, right? But when we talk about, who is being criminalized, it's not all the kids, like it's Black and brown and poor kids, right? Like it's marginalized kids who are being targeted for the school to prison pipeline. Even like the way that we talk about school to prison pipeline, there tends to be like this idea that, it's a track that kids like this are matriculating through, rather than like there is something systematically set up for that to happen. Like, it's a assembly line almost, for Black kids to follow. No one else. It's like it'd be different if it was all the kids. It's not. It's the Black kids mainly who are following this particular track. And what Fu was saying earlier, I mean, yeah, they build prisons based on, I think, what is the third grade test scores in the area. Fourth grade. Okay, fourth grade. Yeah, so like when we're talking about like what we can and cannot do, I think it's less about what we can add, and when this is personally how I feel, less of what we can add and what can we take away. Because again, like there's infrastructure here, it works perfectly. There are kids who have phenomenal education. There's nothing wrong with their education. And there are kids who have education that is absolutely trash. And then the educators are not penalized. The school district is not penalized. The kids are, the parents are, the community is. So like to that, I'm wondering what does it look like for us to like hold like these systems accountable, right? Like there's that judicial discretion, the fact that they're able to charge 10-year-olds. They don't have to. Like it's not like, oh man, like I wish there's something else I could do, but this is what the law is. Like no, like they're choosing to do that. Like just like the teachers are choosing to press charges, and the district is choosing to push forward on those charges. Like so, what does it look like to take away or to hold accountable or to restructure what exists?
I think it's number one, it's going to take education on both sides. And I think like throughout in my phase of advocation is both sides are completely ignorant to what the other side is dealing with. And lack of transparency, because when you talk to teachers, you get one story. When you talk to parents, you get another story. When you talk to the board, you get another story. There's not really any transparency when it comes to, like I said, coming up with a resolution. Somebody's always leaving something out, such as, yeah, we'll give you this, but we sold that. We sold you up the river for this, kind of like the prison pipeline. The other thing I think is advocating for the things that are working, such as something that's somewhat new, but not really new. A lot of parents may not know about it, is a consent decree. Something that was fought for very, very hard out of the Pittsburgh Public School District. The consent decree basically allows you as a minor, and I'm a product of the consent decree. Once you enter the judicial system as a minor, you can get your record expunged by having corrective solutions. I had to do 100 hours community service, 6 months probation, and I think there's a restitution. There are things like that we don't like to see, but in case we need it, we can use it, and we can use those as methods to literally change the lives of those students that are impacted by that program. Also expanding that consent decree to other areas where criminal charges may be pressed or may be charged. The other thing is educating, and I lean back to the educating just all the way around, is educating our parents and what they can and cannot do as a parent. One of the largest things that is the whole standardized testing. A lot of parents, and that which causes a lot of conflict with students and teachers and parents, is you can opt out of standardized testing. Given the state that we live in and the laws that that we're trying to change around how we educate our kids, that's an example of it's kind of like a receipt saying this is why we need change. If we have half the state opting out of the standardized test, now the state is like, okay, why are we spending this money? And it's there are simple things like that, as far as short-term strategies that we can do, but long-term, we got to change it. As Judge Sierra said, it starts with our judges and how we're changing these laws. A lot of these laws, we looking at like, where did this come from? Who voted on this? And who did that? And for the simple reason why we're here tonight and we'll be here tomorrow, be around tomorrow, is voting power. Like, we have to vote these people out. We have to also put responsible, eligible people, not politicians, but people who are going to fight on our behalf, who are going to listen to what we say, who are going to take what we say to the table, and not cloud it with their own ideas. That's important. That's how we're going to win long term. Like I said, a lot of this discretionary stuff lies within our own state constitution, our own local legislation. That's what we have to change first.
I appreciate you saying that, like, we need people, not politicians, in political roles, right, as elected officials. And I also doubly appreciate you saying that, like, it's not the elected officials' agenda that they should be pushing, it's the people's agenda that they should be pushing. That's what you're there to do, is to represent the people. And oftentimes we see folks, campaign on, I'm here for you, I'm here for you, I'm here for you. And then they get there, and all of a sudden, all the things that the people asked for, needed, and relied on them to represent them for, all of a sudden is not priority anymore. Well, I got you next time. I got you next time. Don't worry, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, and it never comes. So I appreciate you, highlighting that. Oftentimes, I feel like we're kind of almost conditioned to think that people who are the best politician are the best for the job. And it's like, no, that's not, I don't need a politician. Like, no, I need these potholes filled, bro. Like, no, I need my schools to work the way they're supposed to. Like, I need a grocery store, and a politician, just because you've been in politics or you've studied political science or you're charismatic, like, that's not enough. Like, I'd rather you be an asshole, like, if you're going to do the job. Like, I'd just rather that, because that means that you're going to actually do what you're supposed to do, rather someone that can smile in my face and stab me in the back. So just wanted to point that out. Ms. Toni, you had said that you had mentioned that, for one thing, we need to do away with these privatized prisons. Absolutely. You know how many judges then went to jail for getting caught up for illegally sentencing people, like, fabricating circumstances where people, kids and adults, were sent to jail because they were getting kickback from these private prisons. So absolutely, we need to get rid of that. That's a known thing, that we need to get rid of that. And it's not like, oh, that used to happen. That happens all of the time. It happens all over the time. Like, there was a judge in Washington County that was disbarred in the last 10 years. I don't know where in that 10-year span, but they were disbarred for being found to fabricate evidence, to convict folks. This is a current issue. But I also heard you say, Ms. Toni, that the judges need to take on more responsibility. What I heard you say is that, they need to practice discretion in the way that is very person-centered. So rather than criminalizing and penalizing folks who come before them, issuing, corrective action that is true to the person's circumstances is what I heard. Is there anything else that you see that we can do, that they can do, that the districts can do to improve our not only our student outcomes, but our community outcomes, right? Because our students are like the roots of our community, right? Like they indicate health.
So we do have, Fred talked a little bit about that before he left. He talked about restorative justice. And so we do have restorative justice as well in our school system. We just need to follow it. We have it in place. Some schools do it much better than other schools. But collectively, overall, as a district, we just need to follow it. And we need to be more consistent with it. John Wade was on here. His comment had came across. He's a security officer at Brashear High School. And that security team over at Brashear High School, they do a wonderful job working with the students. They advocate and fight for the students. To his point, he said that security and school police are not the ones who are filing the charges, and that's absolutely correct. They are not. They are doing their job. They're doing the paperwork end of it. So it is the teachers who are filing charges. It is the administration that's in agreement, or the administration who's filing charges as well. But we just collectively have to do a better job in dealing with issues that arise in our school. That should not be our go-to plan. Our go-to plan should not be to file charges against students. We need the restorative justice. We need restorative justice. We need also to conflict resolution. We need to know that teachers and adults in the building, they're not always right. Adults can be bullies too. So we have to be real about those things, that, just because you're an adult doesn't mean that you're always right in a situation. So we need to do a better job in reaching and putting a support system around the students and helping them. Every school has student services assistants in the school. And so because you have student services assistants, or student services department rather, in the schools, you have social workers, you have counselors, you have people that are trained to work with students when students have issues. So why can't we call those people in and have those people come in and deal with some issues, and to do conflict resolution when there's conflict, and have them come in and talk to students and have them educate students on how to handle conflict. Why does it always have to get so out of control? It has to be this big gang fight, where a whole bunch of people are fighting, and it hits the news and all of that. How about before all of that happens? We need to foster an environment where kids are, there's someone that they can come to and they can talk to about things that are going on, issues, without getting in trouble. So if you come to me and you tell me something that's going on to you in your home, and you tell me that in confidence, even though I'm a mandated reporter, there should be, if I'm telling you beforehand that if you tell me certain things, I have to report it. But if those aren't those certain things, then I should be able to maintain your confidence, and I should be able to work with you to get a resolution. But we just have to be more honest about the way we interact with students.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that. And folks hear me say this all of the time. Violence takes a long time before it happens. Like aggression takes a long time before it happens. So we'll see someone acting out. We'll see a child or an adult acting out. But there were so many opportunities to intervene. Like there were so many opportunities where they were being harmed. They were the victim and no one intervened. Nobody validated them. No one protected them. And they asked in their own ways. Not now, especially when you're talking about kids. Kids don't always have language, right? That's why they have their behaviors, right? Kids have behaviors before they have language, right? And rather than, checking in to see, well, what's going on? We either ignore or we criminalize or we penalize, and then when the outcome or the aftermath is, oh, well, now there's a riot, like, oh, now there's this, now there's that. And we look at these kids, right? Like, oh, you're so bad, you're so horrible. Meanwhile, all of these things then took place. All of these things been happening and nobody cared. And so they started acting out. Behavior is a symptom. Like, it's not the cause, it's a symptom. And until we start to treat behaviors, bad, good, and indifferent, as symptoms, like, we're going to continue to be in this cycle of harm, that we're participating in directly or indirectly. I appreciate you. I definitely appreciate you saying so and highlighting all of the resources that do exist that can just be bolstered up and, followed and respected. Chef, so you're running for school district, District 1 of the school board. Can you tell us, like, why, what prompted you to run for school board director?
It's a number of issues. I think the number one issue is that I was a public school student, and seeing how I don't even know how to say this in a political way. Seeing how messed up the public school system left me prepared for life, and that's just like with honest transparency. When I think about some of the things that I went through, I can identify people within my school system that aided me in making sure that I didn't end up dead or on the streets. Um, but as a system as a whole, it failed me. Not just in the education side, but just like in preparation for life. Think about a building that I spent. When I played sports, I spent an average of 8 to 10 hours a day in any school building that I went to. Um, and to think that the qualities that I left with didn't come from, it came from individual people. Like, I can honestly say, if those individuals were not in those institutions, that it wouldn't have been pretty for me. On the other side of things, I have a 12-year-old. Um, a 12-year-old who I have had experience fighting for. A fight that I wish no parent to ever have to deal with. And excuse my bluntness, but I'll be damned if I have to fight for something so hard for so long, and when I finally get what I'm owed, that somebody is going to tell me that I have to do something else with. And that's the part of property that I was talking about, as far as the state says that I have to put my child in an educational institution, but it doesn't say that educational institution has to be worth anything. And that's where I had to draw the line, because I don't like being forced to do things that I don't want to, and I'm daggone sure not going to be forced to do something that doesn't make sense in regards to my child. And I take that same approach to any child that I come in contact with. My understanding is, like I said, children, a lot of people don't understand the communication styles of a child. Um, I'm still a child. I'm 30 years old, but I'm still a child in many, many aspects. So I understand their communication style, and I have to stand up for them because somebody has to. And I'm not saying that nobody else is, but if this is where I could fit in, this is where I'm going to fit in, because I don't like student or children being just treated like they don't matter, or that their voice doesn't need to be heard. If we heard their voice, a little more clearer, or if we decided to listen to what they had to say, there's a lot of issues, like Food said, like we would, we always have adults always come with this, oh, I'm the oldest person, I'm the, but I've learned there's some things about myself from my daughter that I would have never, that myself or my peers wouldn't have picked up on. But understanding that they come with that innocence and that honesty to get me together. So like we can't shut them out, and that's what I'm willing to do for the school board, is listen to what the students have to say, listen to what the community has to say, and like I said before, not come with my own ideals. Yeah, I have an idea of what education should look like, but that doesn't mean that it should look like the same thing for everybody. Um, as opposed to figuring out how we can include everybody's point of view, and not just saying we're doing this because the law. I'm not, I don't, I never got down with that. And I think the climate of the country has showed us that some stuff don't make sense to even obey. So, you know, I'm just not here to just keep up with the status quo, but to take education to the next level in this area and understand what that really and work with the other board members to understand what that really means.
Word up, word up. Thank you for sharing that. It makes me think about your earlier comment that we don't need politicians, we need people in these places, in these roles. Being a product of public school, public school system, like where it's fruitful, where it's lacking, and I find it to be very important that, and this is the one thing that I was excited about when you said that you were running for school board, is those, I think about the kids that are usually ignored, not thought about, unheard, unseen, like usually left behind, which are also the students that typically are, found in the school to prison pipeline, like the ones that are not being listened to. And the status quo doesn't listen to our kids like that. So like, yeah, I want somebody who's going to see and look directly at those kids, like our kids that are not nourished the way that they needed to be nourished, not protected the way they need to be protected, right? There are decisions that are being made that is not putting our kids first, and our kids are suffering, and we see that, right? Like, I mean, I work with kids a lot myself, and my students who attend like Westinghouse have told me that they've had year-long substitute teachers who are not educating them. They're giving them like packets that is unrelated to their subject, and they're not, they don't have the support. Even if they're like on target with the subject, they're not receiving the support because these are not their teachers, like they're substitutes, supposedly short-term substitutes. And who is being, held accountable is the students, because they're still being graded. So I don't have a teacher, I don't have support, but I'm still being held accountable for this information that I have not even had an opportunity to learn, which is wildly, in a systemic way, right? Wildly violent, right? Because these kids are going to they're going to continue to either be passed forward, which happens quite often, or they're going to be stuck in limbo in ninth grade or whatever grade that they're in. And these are like their age doesn't stay there. Like they're going to continue to grow, and they're going to become adults, and adults without a real education or an education at all. So I think it's very important. And again, like just kind of highlighting with what you said there, it's like I have ideas, I have thoughts, but it's not a me thing, it's a we thing, and not just we on the board, it's we the students, like we the the school environment, we the community, because I ain't got all the answers. I just know I want our people to be taken care of. So I appreciate that. So I know we got a little jacked up at the beginning. My bad. We trying to be out here for this press conference. And again, I'll say it one more time. Robert Gowins, the police officer formerly of Wilkinsburg Police Department who murdered Romir Talley, they tried to secretly, quietly hire him out Penn Hills, and we were having none of it. So there was a press conference and protest scheduled. And apparently at the press conference, Penn Hills announced that they released Robert Gowan, so he will not be joining the force out there. He won't be staying on the force out there. So that's beautiful work that the community did. Because quite frankly, and let's be completely honest, if we ain't happen to find out that he was there, and if we ain't, put the pressure on, if Nikki Jo Dawson wasn't as loud as she is, like if Fawn Walker Montgomery wasn't as loud as she is, if all of you were not as loud as you all are, he would be out there and we would not be safe. Penn Hills would not be a safe community. We would not be a safe community. So that's the big ups to all of you. Big ups to all of you for that.
With that being said, go vote tomorrow. That mayor that's out there, she's on the Court of Common Pleas docket. So y'all know she's automatically go vote tomorrow. This election, and the importance of this election is that there are 9 judicial seats up, all seats that are going to be withheld for a 10-year term. That's probably longer than some of our lifetimes will continue. We have to change that now, or we're going to be dealing with the next 10 years of the same cycle. Go vote tomorrow, from mayor down to your Democratic chair seat. Like, there's a bunch of seats. Do your research. You got about 12, little over 12 hours to do your research on 40-something candidates. find your district. If you need help voting, vote 411, type in your address. It'll tell you exactly where you're supposed to go vote. It'll tell you who's on your ballot, so that way you can get your research done. I think there's 20 or so judicial seats up, from sheriff all the way down to magistrate. Magistrate is another big seat, because when we talk about the school district, and the magistrates are the first people who see our kids and decide whether or not these charges are going to be brought, especially in situations of evictions, school related issues. Like, all of this stuff goes to a magistrate before it even hits the common pleas. So if we really want to put a stop there, we gotta strategically, check off these boxes, from school board, magistrate, court of common pleas, all the way up to the people to common pleas court, who are making the laws that put our systems in place. Vote tomorrow, 8 a.m. to 7 or 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Go vote. Go vote. Go vote. Go vote.
Yes, absolutely. And to Los's point, the mayor of Penn Hills, Pauline Calabrese, she is running for judge of common pleas. Apparently, she's ran before, and people wasn't with it then. You definitely should not be with it now. She has lied and said that she didn't know that Robert Gowans was hired. Made it like she found out with the rest of us, and that's not true. We have it confirmed that that's not true. She was actually the one that gave Penn Hills the go-ahead to hire that man. And so, like, this person who clearly did not care about hiring a murderer does not have our best interests at heart. Like, you can't, because that put everybody at risk. Definitely go vote. Very important. I mean, all of our elections are super important. Don't ever think that there's an election that is not important. Like, all of these seats are always going to be important. But as Lo said, there's over 20 judge seats that are, or over 20 folks who are running for judge. Locally, I believe there's 9 seats available. We want to make sure that those 9 people are people who are actually going to represent our people. And to Los's point, those are 10-year terms. 10 years. You know how much damage that can be done in 10 years. And let me hold on to that really quickly. So in 2016, there was a ballot vote to increase the judicial retirement age from 70 to 75. It was a really close vote. It passed. It was like I think 50.1 or something percent voted to approve it, and like 49 something to vote against it, and it passed. At that time, Judge Jeff Manning and David Cashman were both approaching the age to be forced into retirement. Judge Cashman specifically, he was the judge that presided over the Johnny Gamage trial, and 3 officers that killed that man got walked. One of them, who was historically violent, out in the Brentwood area, walked, and then 2 others. There was one person that wasn't even charged who was a part of it, and he also put away Joe Hall. Joe Hall is 32. He's my age. He's been in jail for the past 14 years for a crime that they have absolutely no proof, that he was anywhere, even in the area. But there's a lot of proof that he wasn't. There's a lot of proof that he ain't had anything to do with it. And the only reason why his name was even brought up is because his mom thought that he was the kid that was unfortunately murdered. And that's where they got his name from. This was also Judge Cashman. And so that move to increase the judicial retirement age was also pressed by a friend of Judge Cashman's. And so in the past, and so now Judge Cashman, Judge Jeff Manning, and several other judges are able to sit for another 5 years. And please believe they already said that they plan on pushing that again, to do away with the judicial retirement age altogether. Like, that is not a game. You know how many people that they see in a day, let alone 5 years, and then let alone 10 years. Like, the judicial terms are 10-year terms. So we need real people in the place. Like, we need people who care and love us, like who treat us like people who will do their job ethically with integrity in those seats. So make sure that you do go out and vote. So I'm going to take a step back. Ms. Toni, did you have anything else that you want to say to the folks? Chef Los, do you have anything that you want to say to the folks? Ms. Toni first.
Yes, I too just want to tell everybody to get out and vote tomorrow. Local elections are extremely important. I'm District 3, so I can't vote for you, Carlos, but you got my vote because you're the man. Carlos was one of my students. He was one of my SAD officers, Students Against Destructive Decisions, and he was a leader back then. And he wanted to be involved, and he worked so hard, and he is just an amazing young man. So he would be a wonderful added to the school board. But my district is District 3, so that's Lamont Frazier. So please vote for Lamont Frazier tomorrow as well. And thank you all very much for having me. And it's from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So that gives everybody plenty of time to get there to vote.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that ad. I thought it was till 8, so that's great. That you got all day. Chef?
No, I mean, that pretty much capitalizes everything that I had to say, other than the fact that, and I know it shouldn't be a problem now, but if you have a job and you like, I got to be there all day, if your job respectfully does not honor your right to leave and go vote, it's time for it. Tomorrow should be your last day, especially in this region. But that was a conflict that came up earlier. Is like, what if you have to work? There's plenty of enough time to vote to make sure that you can go vote. But just so happen your job is obligated to honor your right to vote. It's not exercised, but that is your right as a citizen. If they don't honor it, then like I said, plan on that being your last day. There's several jobs hiring across the city, all over the place. But let's get out and vote. Let's show this county what Pittsburgh is really made of. Let's show the state what this county is really made of, and show them that we want change, and change that reflects the people that are here.
Word up. Thank you so much. Chef Carlos Thomas is running for District 1 School Board. Please, definitely, if you're in District 1, go ahead and vote. If you know Chef, he's not just saying it. He's not just showing up like, oh, I want to run for a thing, so let me pretend to be for the people. He's been doing this, as Miss Toni said, since he was a kid himself. So you want somebody who cares about people in these spaces. It means everything in the world. It's not about, like, in to Chef's point, when you have to depend on the people in place for your safety and your nourishment, that's a broken system. You need the people who are building the system, who are maintaining the system, who are writing the laws and taking them away. Those are the folks we need to be for our folk, and that has not been the case. So we need to make sure that we're putting the right people in place. Vote for Chef Los tomorrow for District 1. Vote for all of the dope people. Check out the slate of 8 for the judicial spots. Check those folks out. If you need any more information, like hop on our page or our group on Facebook, the Narrative Justice. There's plenty of candidate information, folks who, and again, people who have a track record of doing good, not just in the last year, at them showing up in community, not in the past 2 years, at them just showing up in community, doing community service, and smiling and all of a sudden these 2 years is the only record they have of doing well for the people. We need people who, like, this has been their life. People have been their life. That's who we want into these spaces, because those are the folks who are actually going to represent you, not the folks that will disappear the minute they get in. So thank you all. What's up, Bree? Aw. Chef Los with the babies. So this will conclude this episode. Thank you all again for hanging in here for us. Thank you, Miss Toni. Thank you, Chef Los, for coming out today. Thank you, Fu. And Judge Sierra for coming out today and speaking on this super important topic. Really great information as far as like what we can do to break the school to prison pipeline and other things that are super important to the infrastructure of our community. We're going to end today. Go and vote tomorrow. Go and vote tomorrow. We'll catch y'all on Sunday. Have a good day.